Okay, while we're waiting for people to reconvene, I'm just going to make a few comments for those of you who weren't here yesterday. And it's primarily to say that the ideas seem to be flowing together rather well. In the conversation with the generations, moderated by Adrian, we learned basically four things. First of all, that people's engagement with the environment were motivated by love. In terms of grandchildren on Rolly's part, and animals in terms of Vanessa's part. Number two, that what kept them going in a difficult situation and hope up was working with others in a collective effort, and that we can't really rely on government alone. We really do have to have a collective effort. Three, I thought was very interesting about when talking about these issues, Vanessa particularly pointed out that the important thing to talk to other Gen Z was to talk to people about their feelings and the impacts on them, which is the same advice that Catherine Hayhoe, who is the evangelical climate crusader, the exact same advice that she gives. And lastly, that power only responds to pressure from civil society. So we heard that also again today. In terms of Sephora, we had just an amazing presentation full of facts and passion. And her leadership, knowledge, expertise, and courage, I think, as Sylvie mentioned, was just stunning. And she was worried about the fact that crises seem to be normalizing, and we have to really make the point to people that we do need to act. And unfortunately, our oil industry it seems to be better at capturing politicians than capturing carbon, and that fossil fuels have become weapons of mass destruction. So our analogy between nuclear disarmament and fossil fuels is an excellent one that we heard this morning. And I think Tariq and Sylvie's emphasis on the real importance of leadership, as in Sephora's perspective, the public servants' information, because there's still some people that are interested in facts, some of them are in the public service, and the importance of civil society is really, really important. So that leads me to our current panel, which takes me back to my youth, involved in the advocacy for the Charter, the changes in the Charter, and for women's rights in the Charter. And these idealistically and intelligent and committed young people just warm my heart. And it is clear that this kind of litigation is an essential part of raising citizens' awareness of the issues. To actually have it, you have to be a little bit along in the process to actually have it really make a difference, I find. When we were working on the Charter and on women's issues, there was a groundswell of women across the country who sent small little donations, and there were 2,000 women, citizens, not people that were paid to go, but citizens that showed up at their own expense in Ottawa to fight for women's rights in the Constitution. So there was an idea whose time had come, and we have that now in what we're going to hear very soon. And so I'll just introduce you very quickly to our two speakers, and then, believe it or not, they're not going to sit down here right away, but they're going to play you a little clip from, what's the name of it? Fifth Estate, from Fifth Estate on climate, where there's a little clip about the litigation before they come back up and sit down and tell you why they are involved in this, what brought them to this point in their lives. So Reid, this is quite a funny story because Reid and I met at a flower arranging. It was for EcoJustice. It was a fundraiser, and Irvin and I went and learned to do flower arranging in a organic flower place, of course. Yeah, you have to be very careful. And we got to talking about the case, and I said, well, please, could you come and talk about this? And then, so he is a young student, was a young student. He's getting older now and more worn down, I think, a little bit. But he's still got a big smile and lots of energy. So he, believe it or not, came from the same background I did at the university. He's got a BA in political science and French language from the University of Alberta, which is where I came from as well. And he's now a staff lawyer at EcoJustice Ottawa. And he started working as a student after the launch of the Mather case. And he's then been part of a team that's gone to the Ontario Superior Court of Justice and the Ontario Court of Appeal. We don't have a decision from the Court of Appeal yet. Should be out any time. But that's amazing work for a young lawyer. And it's also, since he's stayed part of this very demanding team at EcoJustice, because I'm a funder of EcoJustice and I think they're fabulous, that he must be a good lawyer. So, now, and then, a litigant. You can't have a lawyer in a legal case unless you've got a litigant. Woo! And Alex Neufeldt is a youth, what do they call a youth litigator. She's the only one in Ottawa, actually in Ottawa. And Alex is actually trying to save the world off the corner of her desk because she's actually a designer, a fashion designer. And like many of us in this room, she has to support herself. She has to have a job. She'll probably end up with a family. She has, things to do. But she is one of the courageous and committed litigators who took this case against Doug Ford. She also volunteers with the Citizens Climate Lobby and Climate Messengers. So if we could go to the little clip, and then these guys would be able to sit down without being blinded by the projector. Okay?
In Canada, young citizens seem to be leading the charge, in public and in court. Suing the federal government for breaching its climate obligations and taking on Ontario over its climate plan.
We have not come here to beg politicians for change. We have come here to show them that change is coming.
Sophia Mather was 12 years old when she and a group of kids launched that lawsuit, accusing the government of weakening its climate targets, risking people's health and lives.
Open up those eyes a little bit more for me.
Sophia is 4 years older now, so is that lawsuit.
Beautiful. Chin down a bit.
Well, it's been a phrase that I've been saying, but when all else fails, sue. We felt like when activism and going out and protesting, it kind of feels like we're talking to politicians and they can choose not to listen.
Today's task, a publicity shoot, part of a campaign to capture attention and grow funding. Last year, a judge agreed with parts of their argument. Climate change will have a disproportionate impact on youth and Indigenous people, but dismissed the case.
What chance do you think, or why do you think it could have success at the appeal stage?
Regardless of if it has like a final win, there's a lot of people that are paying attention to this and realizing that their government is not paying attention to their future.
Introducing the Narwhal Freo Z Ultra. Clean before you even notice it. This is intelligent cleaning with...
Today is their hearing in Ontario's Court of Appeal.
We're walking to court. I'm like nervous and excited at the same time.
I feel like I'll just keep going. Yeah, as long as it takes.
Madison Dyke is focused on the end game.
I think I feel really emotional. Yeah, I feel emotional that I need to be in this position, and I really also hope that the next generation doesn't have to stand on these courts fighting for their future.
Their case may fail on appeal, but across North America, dozens of climate lawsuits are ongoing against governments and corporations.
Well, so here in Victoria, I've been to 3 demonstrations, walking around with my Tracy and I and the placard sign.
And in British Columbia, one woman won't stop either.
Do you think in your lifetime it'll make a difference?
I hope so. Yeah, I think so.
Jane Armstrong is living in Victoria now, carrying on with a campaign in honor of her sister who died in that heat wave.
On Father's Day.
Please excuse me if I get up and down. Sometimes the changing positions helps with my knee from the knee operation, so very sorry. But what I would like to do is start with Alex, if possible, because it feeds right into what we just saw. And please tell us, Alex, what brought you into this situation where you are suing the government?
The government.
That's
yes,
right.
exactly. Thanks, Susan. So, interestingly, in terms of the nuts and bolts of how I got involved, many of you saw Rolly Montpellier speaking yesterday. He was actually the link between me and this case, which shows how small the climate movement is, which is maybe not a good thing, but that's a conversation for another time. Anyway, so there was a few youth involved, I think, already in conversation with EcoJustice about bringing this case on behalf of Ontarians and young people in Ontario in particular. And I think both the youth who were already involved and EcoJustice agreed that there should be some regional diversity. They wanted people from all regions of Ontario. We're 7 young people. I think we have somebody in Toronto, Sudbury, a couple in Thunder Bay, Ottawa, Orillia, so we do have some good regional representation. And so Raleigh mentioned to me that there was this case that was maybe going to get off the ground. They were maybe looking for somebody in Ottawa. Would I be interested in talking to the lawyers about it? Absolutely, I was. I thought that sounds great. The hesitation of like, wait, what am I doing? I'm suing the government came a little bit later. But initially, I was like, yes, that sounds great. So I got in conversation with some of the lawyers at EcoJustice, and the rest is history. Literally, we're making history with this case. In terms of, I guess, the why I got involved, I think it's the potential reward of getting a win is too huge not to try it. There's no guarantee of success. We may have to go all the way to the Supreme Court. We'll see how things shake out. But really the role of the courts is to act as a guardrail if our democracy is not functioning the way it should, if it's disregarding or actively abusing people's rights. That's when the courts need to step in. And we live in a society where court decisions are generally respected and have to be respected. So the reward of getting a win, I think, would be absolutely huge. And even if we don't get a total win, we hope to kick open the door for somebody else to take it further after we're done. And we've already succeeded in doing that a little bit. I'm sure Reid, well, probably both of us will talk about that in a bit more. So yeah, I think every tool in the toolkit needs to be deployed to fight climate change. And this is one that could be a really effective tool if we get what we want.
Thank you. Well, very good. Okay, Reid, can you talk personally a little bit? I know we really want to hear about other cases as well, and I hope you'll do that a little bit later. But if you could talk personally, you wanted to do public interest work. What brought you to that point, and then what brought you to the environmental case?
Yeah, thanks so much, Susan. So, yeah, I think we spoke a little bit about this, and I'm thinking back to my pathway to being involved in such an amazing case on behalf of amazing youth in Ontario. I'm actually from British Columbia originally, and then went to U of A for my undergrad, and then ended up here in Ottawa with my wife and living just east of Ottawa. So I've been privileged to live in a lot of parts of the country, but what's always shaped me is you know, an understanding that we need to plan across this whole country together and in each of our provinces to have a future where that life is possible and it makes sense for people, no matter where they're from. And where I'm from in BC, I'm not living there right now, but through every summer, for example, my family is pressured, wondering if this is the year that where we are in Salmon Arm, in the shoe swap, is going to be the full evacuation of our town. We've seen that in Jasper. When I was about 2.5, we were evacuated when there was a large fire just up the hill from us in Salmon Arm itself. So if we really think about our paths, at least for me, it's shaped by those pressures and those concerns about if these things get worse, as we know they will on our current trajectory, we're all going to be touched by the impacts of climate change. So when I came to law school, I was just thinking about general public service. Maybe I would work in government as a lawyer. That's a place to work on behalf of public interest, right? But after a little bit of time at law school, I thought, I don't know if I'll always feel quite right about the positions I need to take, and it's a difficult question to think about. You know, that's a big client to serve with a lot of differing, varying interests. So then I had the chance in my second year to take the EcoJustice clinic and see that working for public interest does not just mean working at government, but it can be working with government and pressuring government, especially on things that I know had been a concern of mine as far as my public interest concerns, whether it was health, equality, but also obviously our environment and how it affects me and others. And I realized that to be working in public interest for a group like EcoJustice, you could be, you know, involved with the government, but pressuring them to do the right thing for the people of Ontario and Canada, and hopefully around the world if we can all get together. So that's really what brought me to realize, wow, this chance to work in the clinic, and then as a summer student, articling student, and now a lawyer, working in public interest, that's what I get to do every day when we're pushing these cases like this one and others on behalf of people, but also species and the world at large. So yeah, that's how I ended up working where I am with EcoJustice.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. And so I'm going to go back to Alex and ask to talk about a little bit about the basis of the case, the facts of the case. What is the main ask on the case? Thanks.
Sure. So I'm sure Reid will follow up with more of the nuts and bolts. I'm not a lawyer, but it is a charter case. So as many of you know, there are not like explicit environmental rights within the charter, but we think obviously the charter should be used to guarantee some environmental rights. So that's part of why we're bringing this case. So Section 7, life, liberty, and security of the person, got that? Thanks, is one of the main sections that we are alleging as being violated by the Government of Ontario's conduct. The conduct that we're going after is specifically their GHG reduction target. Before the Ford administration came to power, the previous administration had a series of targets that were not too bad. Then Doug Ford came in, made just one target, I think, right? It was just one, and rolled it back significantly. And so that obviously is egregious, but we also thought represented an opportunity because it's not just a matter of, you know, governments are doing something, but they're moving way too slow. It's not enough. No, he took us backwards. He took us in the wrong direction. And we think that that's compelling for the courts in terms of violating our rights. Like, it's not just passively not doing anything. Like, he did something bad. So that, very, very technical legal terms there. He did something bad. So that's kind of the basis of the case. And what's really interesting to me that I've come to realize being part of this case that I hadn't thought of before is we're really asking the legal system to look at this very differently than we've been used to. I think kind of the status quo of how you might think about targets is, well, there is a target, it's maybe not that great, but he has a target and he's saying we can't, we have to reduce emissions by this amount. That's a good thing, right? But actually what we're saying is, no, look at the flip side. By saying you have this target and we're going to reduce by this amount, what you're actually saying is this whole other amount is the allowable amount that we think is acceptable to emit. And we're like, no, that's absolutely not acceptable. So we're trying to convince the courts to see it in that way, that this is not a matter of taking insufficient action. It's actually violating our rights. And again, to go back to what I said before, doing something bad. So that has been really eye-opening for me to realize that that's actually what we're trying to get the courts to see.
Excellent. Excellent. Reid.
Yeah, Alex covered a lot, and she may not be a lawyer, but she's got this case down pat, that's for sure. She knows it's her case. And I think the whole point of the difficulty and the interest, actually, in what this case can do for the Charter is a really core topic. So, we talk about the Charter a lot, but maybe the vision of what it actually is and what it could be is something that as civil society we don't actually think too deeply about. We just say, I have some rights and they're in the Charter, but what's it really going to mean now and in our future when you're facing things like, if we do what Ontario is currently doing across the world, their level of target, that's a very low ambition, it's a world of, 3, 4, maybe 5 degrees of warming. If everybody was following this ambition, this plan, this target, just for 2030, let alone that they don't actually have anything planned beyond that. But with that short-sighted ambition, we think, well, this is supposed to be our foundational rights document. It says we have a right to life, security as a person in this country. And under Section 15, you have a right to equality under the law and in the actions of government, and non-discrimination based on things like age. So if you're youth or a future generation, and the things happening right now, we know this carbon that is being allowed to be emitted is out there for decades, hundreds of years. Nothing substantial so far has been shown to reverse that. What is your world going to be like, and what is the Charter even going to mean for you? If there is no security to your person because of the threats of wildfire and smoke inhalation in British Columbia, or rampant flooding and billions upon billions of dollars of damage every time in Toronto and Ottawa that these things happen, and they start happening more. So what is the underlying basis for having rights if we don't have a world in which to live them that makes any sense? And so I think it's a big struggle and a different kind of question for the courts to think about those rights as compared to maybe what drafters of the Constitution were thinking when the Charter piece anyway, where typically Section 7 is about like when you're incarcerated by the state and they've done something very explicit to you, that needs to be, if it's done to you, in a way that doesn't violate those profound rights, because that's such an immense effect on anybody's life when your life and liberty and security of the person is affected by the state. That's an explicit thing that the Charter can be used for. The question is when the state is in this gray area of, well, we're sometimes just not acting on climate change, or when we do take action, we say we're doing a great thing by doing any emissions target at all. But the question is, if you set a target, if you sort of normalize a course for 30% emissions reduction from 2005 to 2030, aren't you just saying with all the planning through your policies and your environmental value statements and all these things that permeate what will happen, and the goal you're saying is to actually just arrive at that target alone, actually you're just, like Alex said, endorsing a future where that 70% that's left over is completely fine, the government endorses it, and it's where we should be, and that's an immense amount of warming if that's the level that you think is acceptable, and we're saying we're doing our part. If everybody in the world did it, you'd be at an immense amount of warming that we can't live and have any security of the person in, for example. So those are just some of the theories, I think, behind the case. We can get into the history of how it's gone and everything, but the first court decision, it's a long decision to read, but I can summarize a little bit of it. It really shows the difficulty a court has in not being a policymaker, and that's, you know, not typically the role of the court, but trying to hold government to account for what it does do. And it's a court that said it's clear the facts of climate change are as we pled them. Ontario is contributing to those facts that are happening, of those harms, through a bunch of expert reports and such that detail what's happening to Ontarians and will happen. So that's not a question. It's not a question about is it happening, is Ontario contributing to it. It's, is our charter capable of protecting us from those things? And that's the question that's really now with the Court of Appeal, and we don't have the answer yet. It's been about 9 months since the hearing last January, but hopefully we have a decision sometime soon, and we can keep trying to answer that question for Ontarians, Canadians, about really how much can we depend on the Charter as it is to protect us, or as one tool, at least we hope we can use in this struggle against climate change.
Thank you, Reid. I'd like to go back to you, Alex, and say, you talked about kicking the door open, and I think this does relate to some of the information that came down in the dismissed case, and the reason there was any hope in having it appealed. Can you just say something about that and how you and your colleagues felt about what happened?
Sure. So this case has been a long and winding road. I think we launched it officially in 2019. And since then, we've been in court 3 times. The first time was what Reid was referring to just a moment ago, which I will touch on that really quickly too, because that also kicks the door open. Basically, the Ontario government tried to throw out our case, saying the court was not the right place to discuss these kind of issues, and also it had no reasonable chance of success. Unsurprising that they would try to do that. Seems like governments try to do that with this type of case in general and have succeeded at the federal level, notably. So Ontario's like, we'll try that too. They did not succeed. We had our day in court the first time around, and the judge essentially said that it was not plain and obvious that our case wouldn't succeed, and also that courts can review these types of situations, that this isn't like too political for a court. So that was really exciting, because I think we were the first climate case in Canada to have gotten over that hurdle. So that felt really cool. Like, I think we're in legal textbooks and stuff already, like because of that. So that's pretty sweet. And also kicks the door open because now other cases have relied on our case, I believe, to try to argue that, yeah, this case made it through. The judge said that this can be reviewed by the courts, that it does have potential for success, and so ours should too. So that was really cool and exciting. Then we went to court on the actual argument. So that was just like a preliminary thing. Now, well, how many years ago was it now? We were on Zoom, so it was, when did we go to court? 2022. 2022, okay. So in 2022, we went to the Ontario Superior Court, which I learned, it's called Superior, but it's actually the lowest level. So, you know, the legal system. So we had our hearing on the arguments of the case, and it was very interesting, I found, how the judge ruled and how she found facts in our favor and yet ultimately dismissed the case. So there were certain things, like Ontario had one witness in particular that was, I'll just call a spade, he's a climate denier, calling CO2 plant food and stuff like that, I believe. So yeah, that's who Ontario had called up to support them. Meanwhile, we had a large number of witnesses who were obviously very credible, very knowledgeable in their field, etc. So the judge in that at that lower court found that Ontario's witness was not credible, especially compared to all of the experts involved in the IPCC and stuff like that. She literally wrote basically that in black and white, that she did not find him credible compared to the IPCC. So that made me feel pretty good. And she also found that, you know, climate change, it's real, it is and will affect our rights, our charter rights, and that the Ontario government's target, no matter how you slice it, whether you take equity into account or not, in terms of whether wealthier and historically higher emitting jurisdictions should have a greater responsibility to reduce their emissions, whether you take that into account or not, I believe I'm correct on that. Ontario's target is just not what's needed in order to.
You might be aware of the carbon pricing reference, where the Supreme Court actually said a lot about the facts and the realities of climate change. So that actually was very helpful, and the judge in this case, if you read the case, endorsed all those facts as just simply indisputable at this point. But on top of that, we needed to give all of our evidence on why Ontario specifically is contributing to what the Supreme Court already described as a fact of climate change in that case. So as Alex said, the building block now that we have is for hopefully any case that comes forward in other jurisdictions around Canada and around the world. You shouldn't have to go and plead so much on the facts of climate change just to make sure that the court understands. They have these precedents where a judge has gone through the evidence and laid it out in sort of simple terms for those that are reading the decisions afterwards of what the reality is. And then the question is just, what can we do about it with the law? So hopefully it helps these cases build and have a clearer path to success. And so then it turns, though, to the questions that are still being resolved. And those are the causation under the Charter of the violations and whether you can actually make out the legal test. So that's really where we are on appeal. But there's another case going on in Canada. So this is at the federal level. It's called the LaRose case and the Minzy-Yik cases. So they were combined in the federal court system, both alleging from both a youth community and an Indigenous community that all that Canada is doing on the federal level with its targets and its climate plans is also a violation of their rights in a similar way. They had some difficulty at the lower levels where they were struck, as we avoided it originally, in part because they didn't have sort of a specific law to point to. They pointed to a disparate number of measures that the federal government is taking. But they learned from that experience, I think, and at the Court of Appeal presented a refined pleading that allowed that Court of Appeal to say, there is enough here. We shouldn't just be so worried about the fact that obviously a lot of things are involved in how emissions get generated and a government's responsibility for that. There's enough here to hear the case against the federal government as well. And our case helped as one of the precedents, saying it's a justiciable issue that you can actually hear on a full evidentiary hearing. And so they'll now proceed on that application. So we're already seeing the results of just bringing these cases, having the bravery of applicants who are ready to put their first foot forward. It's going to help cases that are needed in other jurisdictions and new concepts of legal obligations in this country and around the world. Just to wrap up, so we couldn't do this in Canada, I think, if we didn't have the brave steps taken in other jurisdictions where I would say that we have a constitution, the charter, where it's not, it has a lot of what we call negative rights protection, so protection against state action. And that's how we're trying to plead this case, but it is difficult compared to some jurisdictions where you have what are called more positive emulation of rights, so obligations to protect a baseline of life and security of the person, which maybe one day the charter will clearly have that. Maybe in this case, maybe in others. It's not a bad idea. But in Europe, for example, the European Convention on Human Rights, it offers a more positive protection, as the interpretation has gone, for people's lives and their security. And there was a case in the Netherlands called the Urgenda case. It was on behalf of Dutch citizens who were making similar arguments, saying the targets that were set by the Dutch state are far lower than any conception of what we need for a 1.5 or well below 2 degree future, which is agreed just has to be the case for us to realize these rights guaranteed to us under that convention. And they won. So that was in, I believe, 2015 and then 2019 when it got appealed and finalized. So that's the kind of case, and even though it's in a different jurisdiction, when you read this lower court decision in Ontario, she actually paid attention to this Dutch case, and she said that's an excellent, well put together example of what I need to be doing here to understand that, you know, Ontario as a jurisdiction has about the same amount of emissions as the whole Dutch state. So she, obviously when you take that fact, you think, well, I can't just dismiss you know, one province in a federation. No, it matters, and Ontario controls a lot of these emissions. So it's an inter-effect around the world that those cases helped us in bringing this in Ontario, and hopefully this case with every little positive nugget, or hopefully a huge one at some point, can help other cases here, but also around the world bring this, because even though we're in these weird national forums, it really is a global legal effort. And it's divided in strange ways, but courts are able to see through that in proper ways to take inspiration and understand it's a global legal issue that needs a global solution. So that's coming out through these cases.
Thank you. And that takes us to exactly where we wanted to be in terms of citizen confronting climate crisis, because it is a citizen's role, with very good legal advice, of course, but it's a citizen's role, and it's international, and it raises attention to the issues in a way that some other items of interest in the news don't. So I would like to thank you very much, and I'm going to open it to the floor, though. So do we have...
There is one question online. Was sent by email. It says, hello, question for Alex. People are often worried about the consequences when considering whether and how to take bold action. And being one of the faces for this case, what have the impacts been for you, maybe negative or positive?
That's a really good question that I grapple with as well. So I'll give a personal story. So earlier in this case, we were discussing, you know, how we wanted to go about bringing it and who we were bringing it against. The Ontario government was always a given, but there was a question, should we bring the feds into it as well? Like, would that be strategic or not? We ultimately decided it didn't necessarily make sense, but I was working for the federal government at the time. So I was kind of like, ooh, if we sue the feds, what is that going to mean for me? And I had some very tense discussions with management at my job. I was very transparent with them about the fact that this was happening. They've thankfully supported me every step of the way, and I think that is an important lesson to, if you're surrounded by supportive people, that obviously is going to make a huge difference. Like from our fantastic legal team at EcoJustice, we obviously could not do this without them, quite literally. My employers was very supportive, so that makes a difference. But anyway, yeah, it was some tense conversations. They're like, we want to support you. We know this is important to you. But if the assistant deputy minister decides you're not allowed to do this, there's nothing we can do. And then I had to talk to some values and ethics folks. It was really, really weird. One of the weirdest conversations I've ever had in my life. They were saying things actually that were not true. I was talking about my interpretation of all the codes that I had signed and stuff like that, and they were like, oh, well, you can't do anything that would impose an obligation on the government. And I was like, it doesn't say that in any of those codes, and people grieve or sue their employer, the federal government, all the time. That imposes an obligation on them. Like, he was just making stuff up to try to intimidate me, was kind of how it felt. And then we made so EcoJustice also kindly referred me to a labor lawyer to talk about it. So, and this is something I trot out to a lot of federal public servants now who are worried about what they are or are not allowed to do. I'm like, you're allowed to do a lot, actually. When you look at tribunal decisions and what's actually in the codes that you have signed, you're allowed to do a lot more than a lot of people think. The lawyer told me, like, you know what, they might fire you if you were to sue the federal government and would be speaking out against the federal government, but because it really has nothing to do with your duties, it's unlikely that there would actually be any legal grounds for them to do that, and if you grieved, they'd probably bring you back in. So I tell people that there's a lot you can do. Know the law, get legal advice if you're facing any kind of situation, because most likely you're in the right and they're a little bit too restrictive. Anyway, so that we ended up just going with the Ontario government, and that was hilarious when I talked to Values and Ethics after that. I was like, yeah, we're just going after Ontario. And after he had tried to like intimidate me that whole time, he just kind of like wasn't smiling anymore. He was just kind of like, okay, well, that's fine then. And I was like, it is fine. So that was a personal example. There was also some concerns about my business potentially, like EcoJustice. Reid would know this more than me, but there's some weird people out there who like to harass you guys and don't like the work that you're doing. So there have been various threats at various times. Like we were told at one point to not do in-person interviews because EcoJustice had gotten some kind of a threat. They were worried about our safety. That ended up not being significant. I don't think anything happened, but it was a bit worrisome. I had a business at the time as well, so EcoJustice helped me get a consultation about security of my website and stuff like that in case somebody would hack me. But I found that beyond that kind of stuff that we were concerned about in the beginning, being really well supported by the team has meant that there haven't been really any negative consequences to my life. I have been really fortunate in that way, and I feel privileged to be a part of this case, but it is certainly something that is a huge concern, especially if you're involved in more direct action type stuff. So yeah, my advice, get a good lawyer if you're worried. I'll end it there.
I didn't set it up for lawyers. I'm really honest. Angela. Oh, no, sorry.
Hi, my name is Raymond Lurie. I have a question for you guys on, so you talked about suing the government based on the targets that they have, right? But now if you look at what we've seen since 2018, we actually have evidence of the government regressing, right? So if you look at the electricity sector in particular, a day like today in 2018, we would be burning no natural gas for electricity production. Yet today, we're at 12% of our production is natural gas, so a lot more greenhouse gases, right? So does that come into play in providing evidence of what they're doing and actually not just meeting a lower target, but actually going backwards?
That's a great question. I mean, you know, when you bring a legal case like this, you have to just plead, you know, you're challenging a law and then the policy that is pursuant to it that's mandatory under this law. So it's not, it's looking just at the target itself. And so the evidence is really just about if you actually just meet that target, we're going to trust the government that's actually going to meet it, which is kind of funny because governments in Canada like never meet their targets. But even trusting that they'll meet it. In whatever way, whether no matter how how emissions are happening to get there, we're just looking at the reality of what that will mean. So it's a sort of a narrow look at not even the reality, but the purported reality of like 2030 that you have to go on. But you have to narrow it to that so that it makes sense for the judge and that it's clear on how you're pleading it. But it's a good point you bring up about changes that are happening and how efforts by government across the whole government, and this is one of these things that this target is that it's supposed to go into like statements of environmental values, which every ministry has in Ontario. That's supposed to go down into their own policies and how they approve projects and things like that. So it permeates everything, at least that's what the plan is supposed to do. It's supposed to permeate everything that this government does to achieve their target, and that makes sense. What's the point of setting a target unless you intend to achieve it and have a way for that to play out? But when you look actually at, for example, the success that has happened in Ontario since 2005, and it's actually about the best province in Canada on the ground in reality by mainly shutting coal-fired power plants. And that got Ontario actually a long way already to that 2030 target of 30% below 2005. So that's great. But that ambition was set very low, and now they're already close maybe to the target. And if they think, oh, we're almost there, you could just coast because that's the target, then maybe you'll start seeing policies that, you know, allow more emissions in certain sectors where there wasn't before, because the expectation is, why would we need to do much better? Where's the push to keep electricity sector emissions low, but also lower in all those other sectors? So, you know, I can't speak to exactly what they're thinking inside the Ontario government when they allow these kinds of decisions, but if the ambition is low, why be so focused on improving the sector? So it's just a good example of, you know, if we're going to take you at your word, yeah, you're going to translate the low target into careless, heavy-emitting new electricity generation. It's the reality of if you take you at your word for what the target is. So, yeah.
Thank you very much, both of you. My name's Ida Henderson. I'm wondering if how much it would, is it a case of you just need to be in a court before judges who have a better understanding of science, some background in science? Because I remember when I first read something on climate change, I'm pretty certain it was this, I think it's the summer of 1975 in Scientific American, and there was an article on the coming issue of climate change. And when I look back on it, I think the only thing they got wrong was, well, and they understood that they weren't sure of the timing, and of course things just sped up. So the concept that biological systems decline exponentially, to me, is like, so many people don't understand that and don't recognize that we don't know how one of those systems is going to affect another and how quickly that decline can change.
I can start off. It's a really, really good point, and I think when you think about the justice system, judges have a very difficult job. They are supposed to somehow be experts in every area of the law, and what is the law? It is so many things. I think we have typical areas of law that judges train for, and we rely on them to be a good steward of that understanding. But it's not just their job, and it can't just be their job to get to the point of understanding things like the impacts of climate change. It's the job of lawyers to be in that dialogue to help educate with their special areas. And that's really the approach as an EcoJustice lawyer, and in any case, but it was clear in this case that our role for the judge, especially at first instance, grappling with, we're talking over 20,000 pages of evidence that was filed, that needed to be filed to make sure it was there and she had access to it, but without orientation is an impossible job to grapple with. And so that was really a big part of the effort leading up to that first hearing, was just making sure we gave the court the resources it needed to start to understand what it needed to make an important decision like this. And I think it's an ongoing, basically, education system where that's the job of lawyers, is to set judges up to have some new information that is not inherent in most of the day-to-day legal work that lawyers or judges do in most areas, so that they can start to be comfortable with these issues and the facts behind it, so they can just know that a bit better inherently and make the legal decisions that are really the key at the end. So that's why, you know, and we reflect, and maybe we were even more careful than needing to be, but that's why we wanted 17 different expert reports that could really distill things like IPCC science down into understandable affidavits, readable legal affidavits, and reports that could set out what really the judge needs to pay attention to. And that's a big effort to have to go through, where you could be cross-examined on all of that. So that's where the bulk of the work is prepping the court to be able to actually respond to this new issue. So yeah, it's a great question.
Hi. First of all, I'd like to say thank you, Alex. Like, your mojo is really going. You're an inspiration in terms of the courage and the leadership, and then coming out on a weekend morning, inspiring everybody in this room to do what we can and to have courage is, like, it makes a difference. So big thanks. My name is Angela Keller-Herzog, and I lead a municipally focused organization called Cafes. So this question is for Reid. I think in the United States, we've seen some cities take very proactive stances. So I think that, like New York, for example, and I think one of the approaches they've taken is to sue for damages, right? So we can talk about emissions and heat effects, but we also have a lot of evidence in terms of air pollution, right, from fossil fuels. And more recently, we're also looking at plastics pollution, right? And the plastics come from the fossil fuels, and then the microplastics, I think, are starting to be found also to have harm. So in terms of the Ontario legal system, do you think that municipalities in Ontario can do things, or is our legal system different, where the city is just a creature of the province and couldn't be suing for harm, like corporations, even if a city was like Alex and had some courage?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And yes, it's true. In Canada, you know, we have the federal and the provincial levels of government. Our cities touch us, you know, our municipal government touches us every day, but technically, as we've seen in Ontario, the province can, in the end, override often and step in. But that's a political decision. On a legal basis, unimpeded, you can see, like, there are cities in Canada, I think it was the city of Vancouver, that signed up, at least at one point, passed that they would put $1 million towards looking into cases to take on for fossil fuel damages. So at least that was going. I think under the new city council, it might have hit a roadblock. But my understanding is, like, these municipalities can do this. And so asking our local officials to do it and start it from the bottom up, I think, is a wonderful idea. And it goes to show, like, you know, civil society organizations, EcoJustice, and litigants can make some waves to push and bring some responsibility through the courts. But if governments do it, I mean, it's way more direct. And we've seen this, you know, you can have reference cases go up just because the government says, this issue matters, I want it answered by the Supreme Court right away. Like, the power of a government actually moving things along is huge. So it's definitely very possible. I don't know how it would play out in Ontario if, you know, the city of Toronto or somewhere, like, really pushed for these things with the provincial government. That's a political question. But if the conversation's even started and people in municipalities want their local governments to look at suing for environmental damages, for example, from fossil fuel producers, that's something you should absolutely push for them to do, because that's a new legal avenue compared to, like, the case we're bringing, and has new tools and opportunities to really bring that pressure. Yeah, I know, like, I think we were talking, the state of California has a similar thing going on. And then there's also the reality that you could also even have collaborative civil society and state or municipal approaches. There was a case that was going to happen in Hawaii where youth were suing the Hawaiian government, but they ended up settling, and now there's a joint plan between those youth and the state to actually achieve net zero emissions from the transportation sector, for example. So, you know, with a brave government, it might start with litigation by just knocking on the door and saying, hi, we're paying attention and we have legal rights. But with a brave government, they might say, instead of wasting time and money of everybody in court, we know this is an issue, it's got to be resolved, we're not going to avoid it, climate change is going to happen and be here to stay, what can we do together? You'd hope you'd see that response more often. So that's another way that municipalities or provinces or, you know, the federal government maybe could be involved someday in actually helping a case like this turn into a solution. So.
I want to echo Angela and thank you so much for your courage and your effort, and it's so great to listen to your conversation today. I must admit, we all have our area where we focus, and so I have not followed your case. So I'm sorry, I got to plead a bit of ignorance here. But I'm very curious about what you expect the next step to be, and maybe what you expect at the end of the day, like, could happen, for the case and for yourself. And I'm also curious about how can I help?
Sure, I can start. Great questions, thank you. So I guess we didn't really talk exactly about what a win would look like. We're just like, we want to win, but what does that actually mean? It kind of means, I think, two things. We would like to see a judge tell the Ontario government that they need a new target or set of targets, perhaps, and have, I guess, a judge supervise the Ontario government in creating that new target. That would be one thing. Another thing, and this could even be, in my opinion, more impactful than that, actually, would be saying that we do have a right to a stable climate as part of the charter, and that like Section 7 or Section 15 can be interpreted in the context of like environmental rights. That would be so groundbreaking. So if we got, I guess if we got at least one of those things, we would consider that a win, right? Yeah, okay. So so if we got, it's like you know what, 2 is great, 1 is fine. So if we got one of those things, we would consider that a win, and probably have a party and stuff. But what would Ontario do is the question. There's, I think, a good chance they'd probably want to try to appeal that to the Supreme Court. Likewise, if we didn't get a win, we'd have to talk about it, obviously. All 7 youth would have to talk about it. We'd have to consider it carefully with our lawyers, but I think there would be some interest in our end as well in potentially trying to appeal that to the Supreme Court. So there is a good chance that the Supreme Court is where it's going to go. Of course, nothing's guaranteed. They could decide not to hear it, from my understanding, but there's a good chance it'll go there. And those 2 things that we want to win are what we'd ultimately like to see. In terms of how you can support, I think this is shooting for the moon, obviously, but it would be really nice if the Ontario government stepped up and did like what Reid was talking about, like be a brave government and like stop wasting time fighting us in court and actually maybe settle and then work to find some solutions. That would be really cool. Or of course, if when is the next provincial election? Yeah, that getting a new government in there would be nice. A different color of government would be more interested in settling and working towards solutions. So those would be the 2 things I'd say on that. Want to add something, Reid?
Yeah, I guess when you're in such a new territory of implications for the charter and for climate and what it can affect. Under those rights, you have to have these steps of what's a win and really what it helps. And is it just about this case? No, it's about the whole legal system's understanding of this terrible harm that's come our way and is coming our way, and how it can play a role in protecting Canadians and Ontarians. So there are some wins already, I would say, just at those levels of those building blocks that we talked about. But obviously, the hope is that ultimate question of charter rights, violations and remedy by the court is what those bringing the case hope for. But that's the whole question too. Like, even if you find that there's been a violation of those rights, we have to help the court understand what it can do with that. Do you just make a declaration that says, obviously there's a violation here, Ontario should address that? Well, it's a bit undefined, so you'd hope that the court would say, well, like as the clear evidence showed, a target would have to be at this level to be talking about below 2 degrees, hoping for 1.5 degrees. So just hoping to help advance those minimum standards that Canadians and Ontarians should be able to rely upon their governments pushing forward to have a future that makes any sense as far as climate goes. So, those are the hopeful results that you look for. But also, like I said, it's not just a story of this case. And of course, even if the result happened, a government under the charter can look at other options to avoid having to implement everything with Section 33 and all sorts of things. So you have to think that the answers can't just come from a court case and from a judge. It's part of the civil society pressure, and I think yesterday Adrian Harewood mentioned power only responds to pressure. The courts are a key point of pressure, but it's not going to be the only one. It's what we do as a society with that result. Are people paying attention to what their courts are saying? And are they pushing for environmental justice, whether from groups like EcoJustice pushing these cases or other groups, or hopefully from even government lawyers who can go up there and argue that those that are contributing to this crisis need to pony up and contribute to solutions that hopefully governments are interested in bringing about. So it's how to define a win. I mean, the win is that we stay below 2 degrees. And this is not the only part of that. But from what we've seen so far, you hope you can just ask governments to take care of us. But when they don't, the courts are a place of last resort to get justice. So with where we are, it has to be part of that conversation. And we'll probably need some wins to really push things in a new direction. Hopefully this will be one of them. But at least it's already helped other cases get close to those results. Yeah.
I'm so glad to see that there are lots and lots of questions, and I want to let you know that we really only have time for 2 on our schedule, but there is then a break before lunch, and I'm hoping these guys are going to stay around for a little bit, and they're very welcome to stay for lunch, eh? You know that, in the afternoon. So.
Thank you both so much. I've learned a lot. Can you talk a little bit about the press coverage? In other words, I didn't know much about this case, so I'd like to know, how we can communicate something about it. And the other question I have is, I'm concerned about the lesson that Doug Ford or Polyev might draw from this case, which is to change the laws. And so, is that a concern that I should have, or can I get rid of it?
Well, my understanding is that it would be hard to change the charter, but I will let Reid handle that. So I'm not personally super worried about that, although there's other things I'm worried about, obviously. If PP, as some people call him, were to become the next prime minister. In terms of press coverage, yeah, that's an interesting question. EcoJustice, again, has been supporting us so wonderfully in trying to get this case talked about. Like there was the Fifth Estate coverage and stuff like that. But yeah, I have had that comment a lot that people hadn't heard about this case before, and even people who are the type of people who should be hearing about it because they are interested in this kind of thing and would be interested in amplifying it. So I'm sure we're going to probably be having conversations in the next few weeks about how we want to talk about the case going forward, because we are expecting this decision. It's been 9 months, you said, since we were at the Court of Appeals. So I think that represents a new opportunity to talk about it and poke our comms people to make sure they're really getting the word out there. So that's well taken. I'll pass it over to Reid.
Yeah, I think just a little piece on the media piece. With any court case, especially one that's really about civil society and just telling people, even when you feel despair that you don't have the political solutions you have, look at the rights you have inherently, no matter who's in government, at least with the laws we currently have, and what you can do. And it's a message to people that you can look to the justice system, hopefully that's the idea, as another venue. And so trying to spread that message and just promote the case and the fact it's happening, the fact that you can do this and push for your rights when you feel like there's not a political solution that's happening, that's something that's been a message that we've tried to get out there. Reporters calling in, we're coordinating things for these amazing advocates to talk about their experiences in their case. So, yeah, but it depends. It ebbs and flows. It takes so long to bring these cases. It's been 5 years. So it's like you'll have the launch of the case and then the lull where everything's happening behind the scenes. Nobody knows about any of that. And then all of a sudden it's back in court, and you have to capture people's attention at that time to say, yes, it's a long process. It's hard to keep that momentum. And in fact, as litigants and lawyers, we can't do it alone. It's got to be a societally involved thing where we're all pushing to have a recognition of these rights through our courts. And that's how it should be. It shouldn't just be, the technical thing that the lawyers are dealing with, just the litigants. No, this is on behalf of all Ontarian youth and future generations. So anybody concerned about that should come be part of those conversations, those rallies, and pay attention to this case and hopefully write about it, promote it, social media, anywhere. It's really important. On the question of the laws and people just saying, oh, I hate this result, I'll change it. I mean, that's always a possibility. That's how we got here. The former Liberal Ontario government had slightly more ambitious targets, and those were repealed and replaced by these ones. And governments, we elect our governments, and they have the authority to change legislation. You're not supposed to really take that right away. That's actually the point of having a government. So we're not saying that you can't change legislation, but when you do act, you have to do it in a charter-compliant way, and that is a legal point that is true in this country. So as far as what would happen, say if somebody just came in and said, I don't want any targets at all, well, legally, what happens with that? That's a new question. But hopefully, politically, Canadians and Ontarians would not stand for that. That's what you'd hope, right? We know what the implications are. And so if you want to face people and say, I'm annoyed that people are worried about their future, I don't want to set a target at all, then you live with those political ramifications, and it's on civil society to hold feet to the fire when you're trying to do something like that, if that's the case. And we know that there are provinces who don't even have targets, so those are the questions people in those provinces are grappling with, and hopefully pressuring and making governments fear not being accountable on these issues. But ultimately, as far as making laws, that's a political issue. Once they're made and how they're enforced, that's when we can take them to court. So, we're just one part of the equation in that everybody has to be involved in getting us to that final solution, those final climate solutions, yeah.
So there's a comment online that I'm going to tag on to your comment, and then the rest of it, please, you can have a conversation with them offline because we're really running out of time. The question online, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm sorry, because I don't have my computer in front of me at this point, but something to the effect is, do you believe there's an opposition party who would be more willing to support your cause? And then the question.
I'm wondering if anybody has ever sued a city for not having ambitious enough climate action plans. And is there any legal justification to sue Ottawa, for instance?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think about municipal level. I mean, we're really just at the forefront in Canada anyway of actually holding those larger governments to account. So I'm not aware of a case in Canada myself on this same sort of target-based or climate action-based litigation. But that's not to say it can't be done. But I think the focus at first has been going after those largest actors. So the reason that I think cases have been launched against the federal government and provincial governments is if we can make a change there and force a target that's not going to lead us down the path to, as it is with Ontario, with about 3 degrees of warming, then that's going to have the most effect. So that's maybe why we haven't seen it yet, to my knowledge, when I think of all the precedents on this type of litigation. But it's not to say it's impossible. And I think something that will happen as we go forward is, while the overall targets and effects on emissions are mostly coming from those top levels of government, how we deal with the impacts of the results of a crisis, of a flood, of fires, tornadoes, municipal governments are going to have to be heavily involved in that. So maybe that side of it and how we recover, we should hold our municipal governments accountable for planning, and responding. But of course, they'll need support from higher levels of government too. So it's always a complex question and more of a policy issue maybe. So anyway, but definitely something to keep pushing for municipal governments to join in on the effort, because from citizens to their local governments upward, that's another way to get to these solutions that's really important, of course.
Did you want me to take on the part about the...
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay.
I'll
thanks.
just say now that apparently lunch isn't quite ready. So Ruby is going to let the last two people at the back there ask questions. However, these guys have been on stage for more than an hour, and I do want to let them out as soon as we can. So please make your questions short and to the point. And we're going to thank them, of course. The one other thing I wanted to say is please be careful asking a lawyer for a legal advice on in public, because he actually can't. He can tell you as much as he, in general terms, but he would have to do a lot of research to really answer that question. So thank you.
I will just take quickly the part about a different color of government maybe being more amenable to working with us. I mean, so we're going after the target, right? So if you look at any platforms from the past provincial election of what other parties' targets were, they were all higher than the current administration's target. So I think it's fair to say that any of those parties would be more amenable on that basis alone to working with us. And we might even decide to, I don't know, we'd have to talk about it. We might even decide to withdraw our case, or we might be able to settle. It would really depend on what they would do. But yeah, I think definitely getting a more a party in with a more ambitious target, which is all of them, would potentially render our case a moot point.
Yeah, I think just to add on to that, though, the important thing is that ultimately there happens to be a party in power that's made this target, but it's the Ontario government no matter who's in charge of it. So this is the current state of the law. The case is brought on that basis, and until somebody were to change it, you hold them to account on the same basis. It's not really about which party brought it. It's the consequences that the government that they're running is responsible for it. So of course, if anybody, whether it's this government or a different one, decided to change that target, it wouldn't really matter who's doing it. But if civil society has ideas about who they want to put in power to do it, then that's something for civil society to push for. On the legal case, it'll be fought until there's a solution, whether it's a court hopefully forcing a government to be accountable in setting these targets, or if ever new targets were set that actually are in line with climate science and what's going to occur because of Ontario's emissions.
Hi, thank you for all the inspiration and for EcoJustice using my donations in a way I'd like you to use them. And to Alex for inspiration, of course. I'll keep my question really short. I have 3 questions. Why did you not? No, but two words per question. Why didn't you go after the federal government instead of the Ontario government? Why didn't you go after the Albertan government, where the emissions are outrageously going the wrong way? And third question, could the Ontario government just say, oh, well, Dougie Ford tomorrow says, well, our ambition now is to do 50% reduction. And the fourth thing is, I'm curious that it's about ambition, because you could easily say, well, we're going to do 50% and then not do it. Why isn't it about, like with the feds, that all the support, billions of dollars every year in subsidies to the oil and gas, building pipelines, building LNG, fracking, et cetera? Cut. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken, for those 4 or 5 questions. And I'm going to ask that, yes, that the other, I know, but we only have a couple minutes. I'm going to ask that the other person be allowed to ask their question, and then we'll give them all to the...
Thank you. My question is, what would stop the province from using the notwithstanding clause to respond to your success in court? And I wonder where you get the money to keep fighting. God knows, all of us who've been working on these things for years never have enough money to fight these kinds of cases. So Good on you.
Okay, thanks for all those questions. I may have forgotten some already. I apologize, but I'll try and respond to a few points. So I think there were two about, could the target just be changed? Of course it could. And that's something the government can do at any time, just like they changed it around the first time. So whether a court orders it or not, that's always something that can be done. It is just about ambition, a target, and I mentioned before that really the targets that have been set in Canada, provincially and federally, have generally been missed. That is a separate question. A court case can only do a certain amount of the work. A lot of it has to be from civil society and public pressure. But at least what this case is saying is, let alone what you're actually doing, whether you achieve these targets or not, if we're not even planning on getting to a point that is going to set us on the course for anything looking like what the Paris Agreement is trying to achieve, these promises that are being made, and that actually are referenced in the very plan Ontario set out, that it's part of the Paris Agreement solution, for example, then what hope do we have in even achieving an actual result, a target that on the ground concretely creates that world? So it's at least trying to say, if you're saying you're part of that conversation about getting to 1.5 or well below 2 degrees, first of all, set a target that could actually meet that, and that we're going to take you at your word that that's your ambition and your ambition alone. This hopefully will make governments accountable for actually setting targets that can lead to a livable world at those levels of warming, which will already be catastrophic, but at least are like not world-ending and societal ending per se. But it is a separate question as far as actually achieving those results. We'd have to see after 2030 if this target was even met or any target was met, and those are questions for another day. And that does show that a court case can only do so much. But what this can at least do is don't tell us that you're part of the solution if your very plan inherently is destruction. So hope that answers, just clarifies that what this case can do at the very least. Yeah, the notwithstanding clause, something that, as a lawyer, even when I was learning through both political science and law school in the 2014 to I would say 18, it seemed like a taboo that it exists, but Canadians don't like it to be used. It's been used sometimes for language laws in Quebec, a few other attempts, but usually rescinded where it's been tried elsewhere. But now all of a sudden it is being used more commonly, or threatened to be used. It's the Constitution and the Charter that we've got, and this is we're dealing with that in bringing this case, and the consequences for Canadians will play out in what governments that they elect choose to do with that Constitution that we've got. So that's obviously a question not as much for me at all as for governments. And if ever choices are made to use the notwithstanding clause for any issue, it's up to Canadians to, if they don't like that, push for reform or just simply keeping it taboo. Because unless it's used for obvious public will reasons, it's important to question any decision that your government makes. That's totally up to civil society. But it is there. We can't deny that it's a part of the Charter. But a question for the government on as far as its usage goes.
I guess I'll quickly address the issue of why Ontario and not the federal government. Listen, we love to see people suing the federal government. That is not the issue. Highly recommend looking into the LaRose and Midzi cases if you want to see people suing the federal government and who have gotten new life breathed into their cases now that they've gotten over that motion to strike, which is really exciting. There are some, I guess, strategic reasons. Like I said, well, and Rita said this too, you got to be really specific when launching a lawsuit. Courts don't want to read like a whole jumble of different information. And in Ontario, there is this one really clear thing. There was a decent target, a decent set of targets, and they rolled it back. That we think is somewhat compelling to a court. And when it comes to the targets, there was a time when the federal government did have the same target actually as Ontario. at that point, it might have made sense for us to take the federal government along with us on this adventure, because then the Ontario government could have said, well, we're just following the feds, that's why we're doing that. They increased their ambition before we launched our case. That no longer made sense. And the reality is, a lot of the levers for reducing emissions lie with the provinces. So we talk a lot about the feds, and again, we love to see people suing the feds. Highly recommend, if you have the resources for that, or if you want to support cases that are doing that, please, please do. We love to see it. But a lot of what's missing from the conversation, I find, is the fact that, yeah, a lot of these levers are with the provinces. They try to obfuscate that fact. They're like, the federal government, they're the ones who, like, control everything, and they, like, you know, do things on an international level. But domestically, reducing emissions, a lot of that is within their wheelhouse. The federal government can't even do anything. So that, I think, is really important. And I had one other point I was going to say, but I forgot it, so I'll go talk to you, Ken, if I remember it. But we'll leave it there for now.
So, guys, you've seen the interest in your audience and the appreciation of you being here. So if they hadn't heard about your case before, they do now, and they'll be talking to other people about it. So I have to thank you so much for coming and staying long.